Will Xi Jinping destroy China? For those of you who are impatient, the short answer, probably. Now, I'm not claiming to be a China expert, but I do have in-laws who live in China, and I did live there myself about 15 years ago. Back then, Jintao was in charge. By the end of his leadership in 2012, China's economy was booming as it integrated more closely with the rest of the world. Hu was associated with collective leadership, comparative openness, double-digit economic growth, while balancing the influence of multiple party factions. However, he retired in 2013, earning him praise from President Xi for his broad mind and noble character. But fast forward almost 10 years to the 20th National Congress of the Chinese Communist Party, Jintao was happily sitting next to Xi Jinping and had attended the earlier closed-door session on the last day of the Congress. And then international cameras were allowed in for the final portion of the day. Just after the cameras had been set up, Hu was approached by one of Xi's bodyguards on Xi's request. The bodyguard tried to lift Hu out of his chair, but he resisted for almost a minute, attempting to return to his seat. But eventually he gave in and said something to Xi on the way out. The most interesting thing, I thought, was that Hu passed literally dozens of the most senior members of the party, none of which acknowledged him. They just sat there, stony-faced, staring forward as he was escorted out. Later footage shows an empty chair next to Xi Jinping. However, none of this was broadcast on local media. Any attempts to search for it were blocked. Even search results for vague keywords such as escorted away or leaving the meeting were blocked. The only image that was broadcast on the state-owned CCTV was Hu's empty chair, barely visible in this wide-angle shot. You would certainly have had to have eagle eyes to have noticed it. It is well known that the Communist Party's mass meetings are highly scripted events. Everything is planned in advance. This leads to speculation that the timing of Hu's departure was probably not an accident. That said, it's highly unusual for the party to air its dirty laundry in public. If this was a deliberate show, it would certainly be a departure from usual behaviour. Its intent was not to show the local Chinese people, but instead to show the foreign media that not only is Xi in charge, he can physically remove previous leaders. Now that Xi is in charge for a historic third term, he's certainly one of the most powerful people in the world. However, in order to reach this position of power, he surrounded himself with fervent loyalists. Yes, this means he can maintain his hold on power. However, it also means that he's inadvertently created a dangerous echo chamber. Mao Zedong ruled China from 1949 until 1976, but his leadership was marked by rash policy decisions that led to the deaths of tens of millions of people and destroyed the Chinese economy. People were afraid to question Mao under fear of severe punishment. Hence why the Communist Party developed a system of collective leadership designed to prevent the rise of another dictator who could make arbitrary and dangerous decisions. There was an unwritten rule that the Communist Party's General Secretary must step down after 2 terms, but Xi had other ideas. Unfortunately, inside his newly formed echo chamber, Xi has set himself up as the next Mao. He has purged political enemies, silenced internal dissent, abolished presidential term limits, and enshrined Xi Jinping thought into the party's constitution. Throughout history, many dictators have fallen into this same pattern of surrounding themselves with loyalists and yes-men who will never question or criticize them. Unfortunately, it always results in the same thing: an abuse of power and poor decision-making. The dictator's poor decisions go left unchecked. Xi has turned his policy advice circles into echo chambers, so people are no longer able to speak their mind freely. We are seeing big mistakes being made in China simply because their internal policy debate has been reduced or even eliminated. Exhibit A: Zero COVID. Despite the rest of the world learning to live with the virus, China has clung to this harsh policy, which relies on mass testing, extensive quarantines, and snap lockdowns to stamp out infections at all costs. Sure, not many people are dying from COVID, but that certainly doesn't mean that people aren't dying from the results of this inhumane policy. Father blames China's strict zero COVID policy for 3-year-old son's death. This boy died from carbon monoxide poisoning, not because it was incurable, but because he couldn't receive medical attention in time. The father desperately tried to call for an ambulance or police, but could not get through. He even performed CPR on his son, which helped briefly. He rushed the boy down to the entrance of their apartment compound, which was under strict lockdown, but staff at the gate refused to let him pass. They told him to ring an ambulance. Frantic and unwilling to wait any longer for an ambulance, the father crashed through the barriers with his son and took a taxi to the hospital, where doctors' efforts to save the boy were unsuccessful. My colleague, a Chinese man, his wife is friendly with my wife, recently had to rush to China to attempt to see his dying mother. He just found out last week that his mother was admitted to hospital in Western China, but things took a turn for the worse and she was placed in intensive care. He bought an overpriced ticket to Hong Kong last week, the only way he could get into China, and was forced to wait in hotel quarantine, which of course was extremely expensive. He had to prove to the authorities that indeed his mother was in the ICU, so had to purchase an expensive document from the hospital as evidence. He wasn't allowed to fly to China from Hong Kong until his lucky number was drawn, essentially a lottery. Luckily, that only took 3 days. Now he's in his home city in China in hotel quarantine, and has been for about a week or so. He still has 13 days remaining. His mum's hospital is only a couple of kilometres away, but he's strictly not allowed to leave. He has to get tested every day, and if ever he tests positive, his quarantine time is reset. He's hoping his mother can hold on until at least he can go see her, and he's also banking on the authorities actually letting him leave after 13 days as promised, although these promises are often broken. One of his colleagues travelled to China a couple of months ago and was met with quarantine after quarantine. In order to get to his destination, he flew into one city and was forced to quarantine for 21 days. He then flew to a large city near his hometown and was forced to quarantine for another 14 days. He then had to take a bus or taxi to his hometown, but was met with more mandatory quarantine by the local authorities. In total, he was quarantined for 54 days before he could see his sister. The problem is, every local authority enforces all these rules because they are dead scared that they will be punished if they do not. To keep their jobs and their livelihoods, they just blindly obey these rules no matter how farcical they become. Xi Jinping does not look favourably on disobedience. My wife's university friend who lives in northern China has a 9-year-old son. All he knows is COVID. He pretty much can't remember anything before COVID. For the last 2 years or more, he does all his schooling online. He doesn't leave his room except to go downstairs and get his daily COVID test. I saw a video of him getting this test the other day. It's like it's become completely second nature for him. His mother has mentioned that he has become a complete shell of his former self. He barely talks. He just exists. His day never changes. Clearly, he has mental health issues now. I met him a few years ago and he was a typical fun-loving boy. Now he's just dead inside. Is this what Xi Jinping wanted? My wife's aunt has recently become a widow. Her husband used to be a taxi driver but lost his job due to a lack of tourists, constant lockdowns and everything else that has been going on regarding zero COVID. He ended up drinking alcohol every day, I suppose to try to relieve the pain and boredom, but ultimately succumbed to alcohol poisoning. The aunt is also suffering from a chronic medical condition that prevents her from getting vaccinated. The Chinese doctors simply will not vaccinate her. Consequently, due to her lack of vaccination, she's not allowed to enter pharmacies, supermarkets, or pretty much anywhere else. She cannot buy food or medications for herself, and must rely on her family members to do this for her. She's essentially housebound and must rely on the generosity of her family and friends. But don't think being vaccinated gives you lots of freedom in China. My father and mother-in-law are also housebound due to the ongoing lockdowns. My father-in-law typically travels a lot on business. He is a coal trader. He knows coal has its downsides, but he also knows that where he lives in northern China, coal is a vital part of the winter economy. Buildings are heated by coal-powered furnaces. Without coal, people would freeze to death. Winter is currently fast approaching this year, and now that he can't work due to lockdowns, he just hopes that the government will continue the much-needed coal deliveries. Despite recent events, he's very much pro-China. When he was young, he was forced to go to work on a collective farm, although he doesn't look at it in a bad light. He seems to have very fond memories of his youth helping to build China, as he calls it. My wife basically grew up without her parents because they were always working. Whenever I've met my father-in-law, he's always spoken highly of President Xi Jinping, and of course, I've never ever argued with him. However, in recent weeks, I've found he almost doesn't talk about politics anymore. He certainly doesn't openly criticise the government, but on the other hand, he doesn't talk about them either. I think multiple years of on and off lockdowns is starting to wear a bit thin. He and his wife are now used to the sudden, unexpected lockdowns. They've got in the habit of storing tons of food stored in their apartment and buy as much as they can when they're allowed to go outside. The only thing they're really short on is meat. I've noticed in their recent video chats that they're often eating vegetarian food. They have lots of rice, lots of flour, lots of vegetables, but a noticeable shortage of protein, although they never seem to complain about it. The only time they get to go outside is every morning they must go downstairs and get a swab stuck up their nose or in their mouth or whatever. If they don't do it, well, I don't know what happens. They just do it because they've been told to do it and they seem to have faith in the Chinese authorities. My parents-in-law are kind of lucky, at least they have food. Some parts of China, such as Xinjiang, are simply running out of food and medicine. All my wife's Chinese friends know about it, but you're not allowed to talk about it on social media, and if you do, it just gets filtered out. People are dying from starvation and lack of medicine, but you're not allowed to talk about it in Xi Jinping's China. Look, I could go on, but I think you get the idea. So back to the original question. Will Xi Jinping destroy China? I think as long as Xi continues along this path of zero COVID, and as long as the loyalists around him continue to support him and say nothing about the mistakes that he's making, the answer is a clear probably. I do not wish this upon China. I know too many people over there. I hope I'm wrong. I hope next year Xi comes out with some miracle cure for COVID and opens up the country. But even if they do open up the country, due to years of being locked down and unable to mingle among their own countrymen and foreign tourists, people are going to get sick. Not from COVID necessarily, but from everything else that they've failed to be exposed to over the years. I don't know what's going to happen, but I just feel like the current leadership in China are going to run it into the ground. I'll finish with a quote from the former head of China analysis for the Australian Defence Department, Paul Monk, speaking on behalf of the Chinese Communist Party. We are trapped in a dead end of our own making. We have appalling environmental problems, gigantic debts, an ageing and unbalanced population. We have eviscerated all civil society, all the generous idealism of human rights lawyers and anti-corruption activists. We've imprisoned them by the hundred. Instead of opening up the economic system, we have been turning it into a huge state debt-driven Ponzi scheme. Instead of educating our people to become effective entrepreneurs and responsible citizens, we have spent enormous sums keeping them under surveillance, censoring them, indoctrinating them, repressing them, lying to them. Therefore, comrades, I, Xi Jinping, do not seek and will not accept nomination to a third term as your president. I am resigning, effective immediately.